What is a policy? We've all heard the term before and seen these things in place, but what are they actually? Generally speaking, a policy is anything put in place to curb your behavior. Think about your daily life, where you work, where you go to school, even your family. There's a variety of rules and procedures that you have to follow at these locations. Anything from a dress code to times and places where you can and cannot be. All right, let's get specific about it then. A policy is a purposive course of action that an individual or group consistently follows in dealing with a problem. I know, a big, long, confusing definition, but let's break it down. All right, the first part, purposive. What are we talking there? What does this mean? Purposive means, essentially, done with intent. Thus, any course of action an individual or group chooses to follow has a purpose. What is that purpose? Addressing a problem, something that needs to be done. Finally, the last part of it, consistently. If this is a rule or procedure, well, every time that problem comes up, we must follow it the exact same way. Ultimately, policies are everywhere. They can be in the public or the private sector. Basically, not just limited to government or businesses. So if that's a policy more generally, what then is a public policy? Well, simply put, it's the government taking action to respond to a public problem. Basically, it's the output of government or the actions taken by government at all levels. This can be your local, your state, even your federal government. What then is a public problem? Well, you take the word public first, and we think about it in terms of the public versus the private domain or the public versus the private sphere. Basically, in the private sphere, problems are solved by the free market or individuals themselves. However, when these things aren't solved, ultimately it allows the government to step into the public sphere and try to solve these problems. Think of something like Social Security. The goal during the Great Depression era was to keep elderly individuals from falling into poverty. During the Great Depression, clearly the private sector was incapable of doing this, thus it allowed the governmental sector or the public to step in. Ultimately, when we try to solve a problem or reach a goal, we need to create what's called a course of action. Basically, this is anything the government's going to do. Laws, regulations, programs to address that problem. So then, why should we have policies? Well, the short answer is to promote and protect the public good. Yet in doing so, the government has to be allowed into the private sphere, and this is something I want you to consider, the trade-off between public and private.